I'm Shae Russell from mining.com.au, and I once again have the absolute pleasure of bringing you data Dan Petrie. Dan, how are you today?
Shae, I'm very, very well. I've been just trawling the markets as they speak. Not an actual trawler, but just there's been a raft of a lot of development over the last couple of weeks. We're in the midst of driving season, but we're also in the midst, for example, of the markets are kind of this sideways moment. They're waiting for the Fed, but they're also looking at metals and in particular precious metals at the moment.
Yes, precious metals have been on one hell of a run. Gold has made so many new highs this year, I've actually lost count, which is unusual because normally I can tell you what's happening tick by tick. But today's conversation actually isn't about gold, and gold does take up most of the headlines when it comes to talking about precious metals. Let's talk about the other precious metal, the forgotten precious metal, silver. Now, there is many narratives around why people should invest in silver. However, you and I are going to put a fresh take on silver, a fresh lens. Well, yes. Let's continue this play on words. Can silver recover from its own Kodak moment? Now, for those not old enough to remember, silver actually used to be a key component of film used in film cameras. And then when we all moved to digital, it basically stopped one of the main industrial uses for silver. Suddenly there was a lot more silver floating around. However, silver, as you are about to tell us, is a highly industrial metal. And do you think it can recover from its own Kodak moment?
It is recovering from Kodak moment.
Recovering?
It is. Kodak, for example, they actually patented and designed the first digital camera in 1975. So that was when the $6 million man was at the peak of his powers. And so what happened there was the film division said, no, we don't want it. It'll actually affect the film business. 25 years later, they went bankrupt. But the truth of the matter is, silver's a conductor. It has far more industrial application than gold, and so it's a big metal now used in renewables, and obviously anything which can do heat well or be in that space is a highly sought after material. And so the industrial applications also in dentistry, aging populations mean the crowns are actually more importantly. While we'd love to think they're gold, silver certainly has a place there. So, that's two, but again, the broader applications are quite significant for silver. So, the price-wise, silver's on target to get back above $30 per ounce. Now, this is actually significant. I know gold's at 2,500. The mind boggles, but we're really looking now at a material in silver, which is, yes, it has precious metal characteristics of being a store of value and being a place to go in times of economic uncertainty. But economic uncertainty these days, as we well know, lasts about a week before everyone gets FOMO and launches back in. So silver at above $30 an ounce is actually quite a significant beachhead to be continually hovering above, and it's really only been at these levels in the last year. So this is actually that Kodak moment. Take two, or just click and continue.
Okay, so let's
see what develops, Shae.
He saw the moment and he took it. I'm jealous I didn't. So let's go through some of silver's uses, because as you and I were having a conversation just off air before we got in here, there is some enormous bullish momentum building industrial applications for silver, and I feel that they're not front and center of investors' minds, and they really should be. There has been an enormous solar farm just approved in the Northern Territory that's going to see a subsea cable connected to an Asian country. I want to say Singapore. I'm looking very unresearched in this moment.
I think it's either Singapore or Malaysia, but you might as well, 50 years ago you would have been right. Well, actually, 60 years ago you would have been right if you'd said Malaysia or Singapore. They were part of the same place. But no, in terms of applications for silver, if you do the Rolodex through it, it's medicine, photography. Yes, even still in photography, it's still used. Soldering, so basically the joining, jewelry, of course, coins, gold bars, alloys, energy, solar panels, and this is a water purification engines all require silver. And again, that's just the the top of it. Electric batteries are another one. So that's like if you were to, I think we talk about the dirty half a dozen in terms of battery minerals. It's really probably a dirty dozen in terms of, and yes, the rare earths are dirty to process. That's true, but but by and large, it has a far more industrial application. It really probably should start be seeing in that light as opposed to being this store of value which people tend to attach to it as the poor man's gold. But I think it really has shaken that tag.
I really hope so, because silver is far too useful to society to remain trapped in under somebody's bed or trapped in somebody's backyard or trapped in a vault, which is how you should store precious metals. Let's talk about price drivers. Now, as you said, it's looking like it will crack over $30 per troy ounce. Of course, I'm talking in US dollars, by the way, for everybody listening. Are the end-use manufacturers influenced by price, or are they going to consume silver regardless of what the spot price is?
Oh, look, you'd have to say that any price of any material, particularly in industrial space, is going to have an input. So that's going to have like an influence, of course, in terms of the price of silver also benefits from the fact that if there is an interest rate cut, for example, those lower yields mean that not necessarily things are all great in an economy. So its attractiveness is certainly boosted in that front. So, but in terms of the actual availability of it, like there tends to be this kind of narrative which persists about, like hard to get hold of. Not really. It's just one of these. The fact is, it's there, but its uses these days are more in the industrial space, more so, arguably, I would say, than you do need to have silver on hand, of course, but its industrial uses are far more prevalent now than ever before.
All right, Dan, listen, I loved your comment earlier about how we have a market crisis one day and the market doesn't care a week later. This buy the dip mentality is probably too prevalent these days for a market crisis to really rattle people. But I know you're always forward looking. You've always got very important charts and spreadsheets on your desk. Tell me, what are you looking at going into next week?
I'm looking at a couple of things. So I always look stateside before I return to the shores like I do in the Qantas ads. But like advanced manufacturing in the US report, so that advanced trade balance report comes out. The other one comes out as a GDP revision. So you actually get to see how the world's biggest economy is faring. And also that keep a mark on energy and also what some of the reporting out of China at the moment. There's definitely a pivot towards investing in businesses in China. So that geopolitical competition's it's a real thing, and that's obviously augurs well for those in the old world economy that produce things, not so much for the technological folk who promote the what could be versus the what we have. So they're my two things. Those trade reports are obviously quite key. And then we dovetail, of course, into the US non-farm payrolls. That normally drops around the beginning of every month, but that's also the kind of I'd have to check my calendar, but that's really that's the barometer which kind of sets it all up. If it has a blowout number, typically it sets off a good month ahead. But September, as we well know, is actually a typically poor month because there's not much news about. And so as a result, people try and flush out positions before they go, oh no, I better get back in again. So that's an interesting theme to follow.
So what I'm hearing is there's a September shakedown ahead.
I will say this: the September will all be about Jerome Powell, not Jesse. But Jerome. So Jesse, of course, for the younger folk, is a song by Carly Simon, and she won't cut fresh flowers, but Jerome Powell might, and he might even keep the wine cold for investors. So there we go.
I'm going to unfairly ask you another question with zero regard with how busy you actually are right now. You made a very interesting tidbit in that answer you just gave me, and that's what you're looking at next week, talking about investing in businesses in China. Now, let's be honest, we know the Chinese economy isn't doing well. And I want to hear what the data is telling you about the Chinese economy. So it's going to be a very open and unfair question on my part. But investing in businesses, how much of this is genuine, investor capital moving into businesses, and how much of this is sort of state mandated capital propping businesses up?
The latter. Definitely the state has a profound influence on what succeeds in terms of what really knocks the lights out, so to speak. But in the Chinese case, they're very shrewd in terms of how they plan. They view things in the time frame of decades as opposed to the quarterly reporting periods, which in Western economies. But the other thing which you need to keep in mind is those reports which you get out of China. That they do come with asterisks and caveats that the numbers surprisingly hit forecast too quickly, often, every time, and that's
without fail.
A cynic might suggest that that those reports are that someone knows something, or that but the reality is that at the moment, you have to look at what the actuals are, and the story in China is that there's a housing construction sector which is definitely under pressure, but then there's other parts of the economy which are performing very, very well, and so like they're still growing at 5%, give or take a few. So that annual GDP growth would be boom in everywhere else, but that's a story. And India is the other part of that equation as well, because they've just completed an election in that part of the world, so they're outlaying their own plans as well.
Listen, Dan, this has quickly become my favourite chat of the week. I can't wait to see what the data tells us next week. Dan, thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Shae, and I might spin up a bit of Carly Simon because I'm not so vain, but the thing is I wouldn't. But when it comes to these chats, nobody does it better. I'll see you.
Mic drop.